SQL. My name is Dinesh Priyankara, Data Platform MVP and Business Intelligence Architect. With this video, I'm going to talk about Azure Data Lake, specifically Data Lake Store, and how it is related to data warehousing. Let me show you what I have planned for this video. First, let's try to understand what is Azure Data Lake and Azure Data Lake Store. I will take you through a set of slides that explain its characteristics, how it can be used, where it should be used, and why it should be used. And many think that data lake replaces data warehouse. So because of that, I thought to add a set of slides on that too. So I'll talk about traditional and modern data warehousing, and I will show you how Azure Data Lake can be used with data warehousing. As usual, I have added two demonstrations, one for showing the way of creating Azure Data Lake Store, and another for showing the way of loading data into Azure Data Lake Store using Azure CLI. There are many ways of loading data into Data Lake, so I'll be adding more videos on that later. And other thing is, I'm not going to talk about Azure Data Lake Analytics with this video because I'll be adding more videos on that too. Okay, let's talk about Azure Data Lake. Azure Data Lake can be thought as a container for holding data. For the moment, think it as a database, but it is not exactly a database. Why? Because most databases require data to be presented in a specific structure for storing. But Azure Data Lake does not expect such thing. It just accepts data as it is. Therefore, it can be sourced by anything. And it is not just a container as well. It allows us to process data and analyze data using various technologies. As you see, we can use Azure Data Lake Analytics, which is a part of Azure Data Lake, HD Insight, which is a Hadoop cluster, and R, Spark, even Azure Machine Learning can be used for processing and analyzing data. Considering this, we can call Azure Data Lake as enterprise-wide hyperscale repository for data, or we can call it as big data, that supports operational and exploratory analytics. We can mainly divide Azure Data Lake into two sections, analytics and storage. Analytics section comprises Data Lake Analytics and HD Insight. Storage section includes Data Lake Store. HD Insight is a full stack Hadoop platform available in Azure. This means analytics can be done using HD Insight clusters such as Hadoop, Spark, HBase or Storm. Again, as I mentioned before, I'll be making different set of videos on Azure Data Lake Analytics, so let's focus on Azure Data Lake Store. Before we talk about Azure Data Lake Store, let me highlight a few more things on Azure Data Lake. I have already mentioned that this is for data, big data, and data can be placed without defining a structure. Analytics can be done on it using various technologies. Because of this, data is immediately available for users, such as developers, business users, or even data scientists, and they can immediately start working on it. Not only that, it has all needed components and functionalities such as data management, data governance, security, integration, high availability and durability for making it as enterprise ready. What can we store in a data lake store? I can simply say anything. It can be a structured dataset which has a well-defined schema, or it can be a semi-structured dataset such as XML or JSON, or it can be even an unstructured dataset that has no predefined schema. Most unstructured datasets are text-heavy files that contains business facts or business data, but they can be set of images and videos as well. Good thing with this is no need to do any pre-preparation or prior transformations. For an example, if I get some data from an IoT device, I can just push that data set into my data lake store as it is without making any changes for preparing data sets for data lake store. Other thing is, I don't want to initially spend time on understanding data too. I can just place them and then later I can spend time on understanding while I'm analyzing them. Okay, if you really think about data related to your organization without ignoring dataset that you are not much comfortable with, it is big. When we plan a data warehouse solution or data related solution, we cannot initially determine the size, but we'll be surely adding more and more to the data to the centralized data repository. Considering that, how big data lake can grow? Can data lake hold all my variety of data? This is the best thing of Azure Data Lake or Azure Data Lake Store when we compare this with other cloud data repository offerings. Not only any type, it just accepts everything we have without setting a boundary. Yes, we can say it is unlimited. It has unbounded scale with no limits, allowing single account to store as much as it needs. This means your data lake store can be a container that holds data size in petabytes or even exabytes. Remember, there is no limit on size of the single file as well. You can place a small files like 2 MB file, 300 MB files, or it can be in gigabytes, or it can be even in petabytes. Let's try to understand how it stores data. If you're familiar with Hadoop, and if you know how Hadoop stores data, then it is very simple to understand the way Azure Data Lake stores data. Because Azure Data Lake is built based on Web HDFS, or web implementation of Hadoop distributed file system. This makes sure that data can be read and written in parallel manner. Let me explain how Hadoop works. When a file is placed in Hadoop, it breaks the submitted file into multiple chunks and then places them in different nodes. Then each chunk is triplicated by default, or multiple copies are created based on custom configuration and place them into different nodes for high availability and durability. This is how Hadoop maintains files and data. Azure Data Lake does the same. If the file can be split, mostly raw-oriented files can be split, and if it is larger than 2 GB, then it breaks into 2 GB size chunks. We call these chunks as extents. Just like Hadoop, then extents are triplicated for high availability and durability. Considering the way it splits data, larger files get more benefits in Azure Data Lake Store on parallel reading and writing, because parts of the files are distributed and these parts can be processed in parallel manner. You can see how they are processed if you process these files or data using USQL, because USQL creates vertices based on distribution of your data or data files for parallel processing. Again, more on Azure Data Lake Analytics videos. I said that Azure Data Lake is based on Web HDFS. Because of this, tools, technologies such as HD Insight along with Hadoop, Spark, Storm, and Hadoop implementation such as Hortonworks, Cloudera, MapR can work with Azure Data Lake, or Azure Data Lake can be used as storage for holding data and processing data. Now we know that Azure Data Lake Store gives much facilities than any other cloud storage offerings. And we know that there is another Azure storage, which is blob storage. That is what we have been using for years, and that is what we have used even for creating HD Insight clusters. Considering that, why we have two types of Azure storages? Let's do a quick comparison and see. That will surely help us to decide which should be used for our data requirements. First, Data Lake is not just for storing data, it is for processing data as well. Therefore, it is optimized for analytics. But blob storage is just for general purpose. It does not support parallel reading or writing, and it is not optimized for analytics. Blob storage maintains containers and then folders and files, but Data Lake Store has no containers. It just folders and files. That makes it as a hierarchical file system. Main thing is Data Lake is Web HDFS compliant, but blob storage is not. You know the advantages of it now. Okay, earlier encryption at rest or server-side encryption, it was available only with Azure Data Lake, and blob storage was completely based on client-side encryption. But now both have server-side encryption, and it can be enabled either using service managed keys or custom managed keys in Azure Key Vault. If you want to see the way of working with Azure Key Vault, I have done a video on always encrypted. It has a discussion on it, so have a look on it. Security, authentication and authorization. Blob storage still uses hash-based message authentication, and authorization is based on account access keys or shared access signature keys. But Data Lake is fully integrated with Azure Active Directory, and authorization can be configured using a POSIX style access control list. That makes security implementation easier. Okay, let's talk about data sources that can be considered either as sources for Data Lake or targets for data lakes. We can bring data into Data Lake from various sources. Not only that, Data Lake supports exporting to different sources as well. For ingestion and export, we can use different technologies or tools. And one is Azure Data Factory, which is one of the main services used for working with Azure Data Lake in terms of importing, exporting, and processing data. This slide explains how we can use Azure Data Factory with Azure Data Lake for importing and exporting data. As you see, Some sources support both import and export, but some are limited. For an example, almost all Azure data containers supports import and export except Azure Search Engine. Azure Data Factory can export data from Azure Data Lake to Azure Search Index, but it cannot import data from Azure Search Index to Azure Data Lake. Remember, though we see some limitation now, you may not see these limitation in next month because Microsoft is continuously working on it, and they keep on enhancing and adding new things. So always check updated resources for validating these limitations before making a decision. There are some more tools that can be used for importing and exporting. One key tool is Azure Data Lake command line tool. It can be used for copying data between different data lakes, and it can be used for copying data from blob storage data lake. But for the moment, you cannot use this tool for copying data from data lake to blob storage. There's a tool related to Hadoop ecosystem, which is DiskCP. It can be used for copying data between Hadoop cluster storage and data lake store. Apache Scoop is another tool in Hadoop ecosystem. It is mainly used for transferring data between relational databases and big data repositories such as data lake store. So if you have a need, then this can be used too. In addition to that, you can create your own custom program using various languages, applications, tools such as .NET SDK, Visual Studio, Azure CLI, or Azure PowerShell. Simply, there are many ways of importing and exporting data, but in most cases, we use Azure Data Factory as it allows us to access more sources and define the operation to be done. And it allows us to make the operation as a job and schedule as well. Okay, now you know many things related to data lake. Of course, we did not talk about data lake analytics, but what we have discussed so far is completely enough for continuing the discussion. So let's try to understand what role data lake plays in data warehousing or business intelligence solutions. Okay, let's try to understand how we have been doing data warehousing or BI solutions. So we start with requirement gathering process and we try to understand clients or the business users requirements. So we have various type of discussion, and then we try to pick the most important and feasible requirements that like KPIs, measures, and then we focus on it. So we go for detailed discussion on these picked items, and then we do various type of designs using bus matrix, sun diagram, just to make sure that we have the proper logical data warehouse design. And we keep on doing this one. We go back to the customer, we go back to the business user, get more clarification and refine the bus matrix, and finally we end up with physical design, which is our physical data warehouse. So this is what we have been doing for implementing data warehousing or BI solutions. If you think about the time we have to spend on this, it is always either weeks or months, which is something needs to be considered. Now the result of this is a physical design, or we can say it's a physical data warehouse, but along with the time it becomes a bottleneck too. Why? Think about the change that needs to be applied, or think about a new requirement that needs to be brought into the solution. Let's take an example. Assume that we need to bring some new facts to the data warehouse that needs complex transformations. So if there's something like that, it is not easy to apply, because first thing we have to do is we have to go through all these steps again and make necessary changes to the design. And the second thing is we need to make modification to the existing solution. This adds a cost and it takes time too. And if the modification is complex, the cost is really huge. What if we bring data as it is without doing any transformations and offer it to business users or smart users or even IT department? Let's see whether it is possible or not. But before that, let's see the technical implementation of data warehouse or BI solution. So how do we start with the technical implementation? We have sources, we have the design data warehouse. You can see some of the data sources are grayed out. I just wanted to show you that sometimes we ignore certain set of data sets. One reason could be like we cannot, specifically when we talk about corporate data warehousing or traditional data warehousing, we ignore data set that are complex because we cannot process these data sets using existing database management system tools or the technologies. We'll talk about it, but for the moment, let's say we have only data sources like databases, Excel sheets, CSV files. So we'll be implementing an ETL solution for getting these data into a data warehouse solution. And sometimes we use staging environment. It is not a must, but based on your requirements, based on the complexities, you'll be adding the staging environment too. So this is how we load the physical data warehouse. And then with traditional data warehousing, we used to create OLAP data warehouse, or we can call them as cubes, but nowadays we call them as models. So we create models on top of the relational data warehouse, and most of the time that is what we open for business users. So we create reports, we create various type of applications that can be used for analyzing data coming from these models. So end user can access these the created applications and created reports using various devices. So this is the sort of traditional data warehouse implementation. Now later, self-service BI was introduced, empowering business users. So business users started accessing sources directly rather than just getting data from the model. So business users get data from sources, relational data warehouse, model, and then business user creates his own model for creating reports and doing various type of analysis. The other thing is these self-service BI tools or applications allow business users to access external data too. So in that case, they can create their models as they want without waiting till IT department creates all of these things, or without waiting till IT department gets these data or gets these external data into the data warehouse. And now let's talk about ignored dataset. Of course, you know that we were talking about big data. So these data can be videos, images, a set of unstructured data sets, or even stream events. Now, if you want to bring this data set into the data warehouse and make sure that business user can use these data sets for reporting and analysis, we need to make sure that we process them and then transfer process data to the data warehouse. So we started using a platform like Hadoop. So we use sub projects like Hive, Peak for processing data as a part of the ETL solution, and then transfer them back to the data warehouse. So business user was able to access data that have been transferred to the data warehouse, or even business user can access data stored in the Hadoop environment for continuing with their reporting and analysis. So then a couple of other changes happened, like we started using cloud version of data warehouses, the cloud version of model, and even the business users started creating cloud versions of their own models and then report. Then Microsoft started giving more functionalities, more features with Azure for handling these data operations. So Microsoft started introducing components like Data Factory, Azure Machine Learning, blob storage, stream analytics, along with Event Hub, uh, IoT Hub. So we started using these components for accessing various type of data set and process them using various type of technologies like Data Factory, Stream Analytics, and the result we can simply pass it back to the data warehouse. So this is how we started using cloud components for data warehousing and BI solution. Okay, let's see how we can use Data Lake Store and Analytics with the BI solution or data warehouse solution. One thing we can do is we can bring everything to the data lake and make data available for business users. So if business user wants to access data as it is, they can simply access it. Or if business user wants to access process data, we can process data using something like Data Lake Analytics or HD Insight and process and keep it. So business user can access process data. Or else we can transfer process data back to the data warehouse. In that case, you might think that we can replace the entire data warehouse using Data Lake Store, but it is not possible. Some of the reports, some of the analysis still require to have a structured data set. So in that case, we need to make sure we have the structured database or data set. So that's why we have to use a data warehouse. Other thing you need to remember with the Data Lake Store is support on schema on read. If you remember the issue we discussed in the previous slide, we can simply bring that data set into data lake store without doing any transformation or without taking that data set through the ETL solution, and then we can apply the schema based on the business user's requirement and process them using either data lake analytics or using HD Insight. So then the process become very simple and we don't need to spend much time on it. And the good thing is we are not going to stick into a structured data set. We'll be having that data set as it is in the data lake store, and if business user wants to read in one way, we can create a schema on it and get the data process and let the user to access that process data through that schema. And the second business user wants to access the same data set using a different schema, that also can be facilitated. So you can see the advantage with data lake store and analytics when you compare with the old implementation. So considering these facts, you might see that we don't need staging an ETL solution with BI solutions. But it is not always true. You might start with traditional data warehousing techniques and then you will expand into cloud environment. So in that case, you can continue with data lake store and analytics, but we just can't say that we can completely ignore staging and ETL solutions or the traditional ETL solutions. Now you know how we can use data lake store and data lake analytics with data warehousing and BI solutions. Let me take you through two more slides that explain the differences between data lake and data warehouse. So if you think about the left part of this image, that shows the data warehouse implementation. So data is always available with a defined structure. So whenever business user wants to access information, they can connect with the data warehouse and they can get the data from defined structure. They have no way of changing this structure. They have to stick into it. In a way, it is a disadvantage, even though there are some other BI functionalities with it. Now, if you think about the right side of this image, that's a data lake implementation. Since there is no structure, business user can access data as they want using this schema on read concept. We can assume that smart user can create their own schema and get the data processed based on that schema and access, or else IT department can actually process data based on the schema required by the business user and make it available. So that's the difference between data lake and data warehouse in terms of accessing data. In this slide, let's try to understand few more differences. So we know that Azure Data Lake is a complementary data warehouse, and when it comes to data warehouse, data lake can be used as a source for the data warehouse. In data lake, we always store raw data or detailed data. We don't do any we don't filter and take it, we don't summarize and take it, we just take as it is. But in the data warehouse, it's always filtered, summarized, refined and structured. In data lake, we can simply use schema on read for accessing data, but it is not available with the data warehouse. It's always based on schema on write. One good thing with Azure Data Lake is there's a single language called USQL that can be used for processing any type of data. But when it comes to data warehouse, we have to always use SQL for manipulating data or accessing data or processing data. Okay, it's time for do the demo. So let's see how we can create Azure Data Lake using Azure Portal, and then I'll show you how to upload a simple data set using Azure CLI. Okay, I have logged into my Azure Portal and I have already added Data Lake Store as one of my favorites. If you have not added, you can go to more services, make a search on it and get it added. So let me click on Data Lake Store. Then it will open the blade which I can use for creating Data Lake Store. So as usual, I can click on Add button to get the blade open. You can see there are only few input boxes, so I can enter the name. So let me say name of it is DNSQL Azure Data Lake Store, and I need to make sure that it is available. Yes, I can see the green tick, which means I can continue, and I'll be selecting the subscription, and then I can select the resource group. I can either create a new one or use existing one. So let me use an existing one, and you will see that it is not available with all regions. Of course, it will be available in future, but for the moment it is limited to these three regions. So let me select East US 2. You can see there are two ways of making payments. You can say pay as you go or monthly commitment. You can go to the MSDN site and read more on it, but uh, in this case we can use pay as you go because we are not going to continue with this data lake store. If I click on encryption, you can see it has been enabled using using keys managed by the Lake Store. If I expand this drop down, I can see that I can have my keys in the Azure Key Vault too. So everything is okay. I can simply click on create to get it created. So it's a very simple process. All I have to do is just give a name, select the subscription and the resource group and the location. That's all. So once it is created, we can explore it and see how we can upload data, how we can navigate through various type of components, how we can see properties related to data lake store. Okay, my data lake store is created. So I can click on it to get it open. So once it is open, I can see the overview. If I have used this data lake store for storing various type of information and use data lake analytics for processing them, I can see some information related to my stored data and the processes I have done. In addition to that, you can see a button called Data Explorer or the tab called Data Explorer. I can click on it and get that blade open. This is the blade I can use for seeing uploaded files, seeing catalogs that have been created, seeing databases that have been created inside my data lake store. If I want to upload a file, I can simply click on this and select the file and get it uploaded, or else I can create a new folder and get my files uploaded to that folder. So let me show you how to create a folder quickly. For example, I can create a folder called test folder, and then I can go into it and upload a file. So when I go into it and click on upload, I get this interface. I can click on this button for selecting a file. Let me go into a folder where I can see a file. So I'm just uploading this sales.txt file into my data lake store. So you can see it is uploaded. Of course, it's a very simple file, some small file. Let me close this and let me click on refresh, and I can see the file which I uploaded. So this is how you use the portal for uploading data or managing data. Now let me show you how to use Azure CLI for uploading files into Data Lake Store. First of all, you need to make sure you have installed Azure CLI 2.0. You can simply browse this web page and it has all instructions for downloading and installing. Once it is installed, you can open command prompt and connect with Azure Data Lake Store. Let me show you how to connect with Azure Data Lake Store and upload a file. If you want to make sure that you have properly installed Azure CLI, you can simply open a command prompt and type Azure. If you see all these commands, which mean you have installed it. Next is you need to make sure you log into your Azure account in order to access your Azure Data Lake Store. So you can simply type AZ logging for connecting with your Azure account. So when you execute this command, you can see you get a URL with the code. So what you have to do is you go to this URL, use this code for connecting with your account. This is what you get when you open that page. Just simply put the code and click OK. Then you'll be able to continue with your command prompt. Once connected, you will see all your subscriptions along with subscription ID. So you need to connect with the correct subscription which you have used for creating your data lake store. So this is how you connect with your subscription. Type the command like az account set 2 - subscription space, within double quotes you can type your subscription ID, something like this. Once connected with the subscription, you can use this command for uploading files into your folder or root. So the command is az-dls-fs upload, then 2-account and your account name, that's your Azure Data Lake Store account, and the source path, that's your local path, and then the destination folder, the folder you have created in your Azure Data Lake Store. So when you click or when you press enter, it starts uploading it. It might take some time based on the file size, but once it is uploaded, you will see the files in your Data Lake Store. Okay, hope now you know what is Azure Data Lake and Azure Data Lake Store. We'll talk about more on this with future videos. Thanks for watching.